The climate conversation has never been more divided. As disruptors in this space, we're hungry to find solutions to the challenges our environment faces. Welcome to the Climate Rebels podcast. My name is Joel Caesar. I'm joined by Owen Barrett and Chris Pomerleau. We are experts in clean energy, net zero real estate, decarbonization, and entrepreneurship. We celebrate those who take action against the climate crisis and are striving to make the world a cleaner place. Thanks for joining the conversation. Now, let's get to work. Welcome to the Climate Rebels podcast. Joining me as always is Owen Barrett, self-proclaimed Adam Newman of Green Building, myself, world's greatest climate podcast host, Joel Caesar. Today's guest is Matt Grocoff, founder of Thrive Collaborative and founder and CEO, FEW Nexus and FEW Energy. He's a sustainability expert, real estate developer, writer, and speaker. Matt's a real inspiration of mine in the field of green building and real estate. As I talked to you a lot about this, Owen, for years, I go to all the real estate green building conferences. I'm pretty involved in the network of people that are in that industry. And a lot of times there's people that are consultants or people that are kind of supporters of other businesses or other developers, the ones that are like taking the action. And I remember years ago seeing him speak, and he comes from, he doesn't come from a real estate or construction or design background. He bought this old house in Michigan and converted it into net zero and got it Living Building Challenge certified. And I remember thinking, look at this guy. He's just out there taking action like a badass. And then now, as we learned on the show, he's taking it steps further and he's building one of the most amazing, forward-thinking, sustainably driven residential developments on the planet. Again, just taking action like we all love to celebrate here. So yeah. I'm a big fan. I'm sure a lot of people are going to enjoy it. What'd you think?
Super inspiring. I think, his story of sort of how he came to be, like you said, with buying an old house, I think gives me hope with the Inflation Reduction Act. If we get millions of Americans replacing their gas stoves, their gas dryers, their gas water heaters with all these electric appliances, maybe we get 1 million Matts running around being like, this is fucking stupid. Why are we burning so much gas in our house? Why does my apartment have gas? Why does my parents' house have gas? And maybe it'll just lead to this chain reaction. Hopefully that's what it leads to. And I think Matt is patient zero.
Well, he's a true leader, true climate rebel. I think everyone's going to enjoy the show. But before we get into all of that, let's dive into a segment we've done before. It's a version of Zero Bullshit. And I'm going to let you tee us up here.
Well, like a lot of our audience knows, we pay attention to our social media comments. And a lot of the comments are climate deniers calling out the hypocrisy of our elites, sustainability elites, I'll call them, which, I haven't hit that tier yet. I don't think you have yet, Joel, either, but maybe one day we'll be there. And we get called out about the hypocrisy of our elites. And so today or yesterday, I saw a headline about Jeff Bezos. He's committed a huge amount of his personal wealth to fighting climate change. Yet when his Blue Origin rocket took off, there was so much methane released that it was visible from the International Space Station. And it got me thinking that our social media hecklers are not wrong. Like, there's a lot of self-proclaimed sustainability superheroes out there that are launching fucking rockets, flying around the world in private planes, taking vacations in super yachts. And is that okay, is my question. I don't have an answer necessarily, but I do think it's pretty hypocritical to tout yourself as a planetary hero and then take your private plane on vacation. What do you think?
It's such an easy shot, and it's a common one from climate deniers, calling out the celebrities for flying around their private jets, and that being their claim that, look, it's all bullshit. They don't care. They're out there. It's virtue signaling and it's performative, and they're actually just polluters and they're worse than everyone because of their private jets. I disagree. We talked about, we've addressed the Leo on this show. I think in a previous episode, you talked about how more people trust Leo on climate than they do anyone government or United Nations person or anything. Yeah. So the guy's doing a ton, investing a ton of his money, investing a ton of his time, companies, business models. He's outspoken about it, using his platform, creating a lot of hate towards him that he doesn't need. Leo is universally loved besides climate deniers at this point. So is he flying around on private jets, and is his carbon footprint probably not great because of that? Sure. But I don't know. I think the magnitude of his message is way more important than the emissions of his private jets. And Bezos, Amazon, his previous company, does a ton for sustainability. They created the Climate Pledge, which is galvanizing huge industries to take action. And they're doing a ton for mass grid scale utility, renewable energy procurement. So it's not a simple message. I'm with you. I can understand the hypocrisy perspective, but I also think you got to give these guys credit. They don't have to be doing this.
So 6 years from now, Raven buys its 100th building. You have fuck you money. Are you going to throw your personal emissions out the window and start flying private?
Maybe.
Love the honesty on the Climate Rebels podcast.
Or I'll be investing in sustainable jet fuel, and I'll have a super yacht that's all electric. And
Joel Caesar, the world's best climate podcast / private flyer fast fashion advocate.
It'll never be fast fashion. I won't go that route, but I don't know. You kind of.
I think it's an interesting point. Jets. I think, until someone quantifies positive impact compared to negative impact, it's a mystery.
So that's a challenge to the Climate Rebels audience. Someone out there, run a life cycle analysis on Bezos' negative climate actions, like his private jets and his rockets, versus everything he's done with his donations and foundations and everything Amazon does. And
should we be applauding him, or should we be throwing rocks at him when we see him in the streets?
And Jeff, we'd love to have you on the show.
We won't throw rocks at you.
Well, that was fun. But before we get into all that, let's dive into our conversation with Matt Grocoff. Matt Grocoff is an American environmentalist, sustainability advocate, sustainable real estate developer, writer, speaker, and founder of the Thrive Collaborative. He is known for his work on net zero energy and net zero water buildings, and for the rehabilitation of the oldest home in North America to achieve net zero energy. Matt is a contributor to several media outlets, including the Environmental Report produced by Michigan Radio and Fox News Energy Team, and was host of Greenovation TV. He advocates for modernized, distributed renewable energy networks and distributed water and wastewater systems that work with natural systems. So, Matt, welcome to the Climate Rebels podcast.
Hey, guys, thanks for having me here. It's a lot of work to do.
It's good to see you. Well, we start all of our guests with the same question to start the show. Matt, how are you a climate rebel?
How am I a climate rebel? I have an incredible amount of impatience. That's how I'm a climate rebel. Look, we've got until 2030 to have our emissions, and that's just the flat out science, and we're not on target to do that. So, with the work that my team is doing at Veridian at County Farm, with the Thrive Collaborative, with FEW Nexus, we are unwavering in that commitment. We don't do gas. We do red list free. We chase carbon at every turn, and I've got a lot of stories to tell you about how we do some of that. But it's really this incredible impatience that I have that it can be toxic sometimes, because it turns to anger, it turns to frustration, and that's when it gets really, really hard to do the work. And as climate rebels, we can be rebellious, but the second that we go into despair, which, as Al Gore says, is not just another tire in the trunk, it can become a toxic anger, a toxic frustration that keeps us from doing our work. So we've just got to keep moving forward and be as unwavering as possible, and recognizing that optimism is a precondition to success, and take that impatience. Accept it. Don't let it become toxic, and race forward as fast as hell.
It's a great answer. Matt, last week we had I forget why we were talking about this, but on one of our podcasts, we were talking about just entrepreneurs and traits that help you be successful. And I think impatience is top 3 to being a successful entrepreneur. I think if you're a patient person or you're complacent, you're never going to have success.
Yeah, I mean, it's with all these things, right? It's like with optimism. Like if you're completely optimistic and you're Pollyanna about things, like, everything's gonna be great. We're gonna have solar, we're gonna have microgrids, and we're all good, and we're gonna capture carbon out of the atmosphere. That's not good either. We have to recognize that those are great tools, but we have to have this realistic, grounded optimism. And one of my true climate heroes is Christiana Figueres. I don't think I can listen to her voice without getting tears in my eyes. With a little bit of grief, a little bit of optimism, or a lot of optimism for sure. That's our goal. She talks about outrage and optimism, that you can't have this toxic outrage, that you've got to balance those two. That outrage is what motivates us, but that optimism is what gives us the tools to keep going.
Yeah. It's really been a theme of the show, Matt. We try to keep this podcast positive, optimistic. We celebrate guests who are taking action and disrupting. And we'll get to this at the end of the show. The last question we ask every guest is, what gives you hope? So we constantly are trying to do what you're saying, remain optimistic, and bring that to this conversation where it's easy to get negative. As you described, we got to have our emissions by 2030, and we are not on track. So balancing those two things, theme of the show of recognizing the challenge, recognizing the data, we got a tall task ahead of us, but still remaining optimistic is tough. So how do you do it? How do you balance?
I really am exceptionally optimistic, and people hear me complain and talk about all the things that we're doing wrong every single day. I focus a lot of my time like we're not doing enough. We're not doing this. Why isn't this right? How can we do more? How can we chase a little bit of carbon? If I'm not doing my job, that can come across to folks as look at this pessimist, right? It's like, but the thing is, I wouldn't be doing those things. I wouldn't be saying these things. I wouldn't be talking about our failures. It's great to talk about the successes, no question, and we need to. But we need to recognize all the things that we're doing wrong and focus on those. So it's a real balance. But to remain optimistic, it's really pouring ourselves into the work, right? Just knowing that all of the solutions that we have out there, they're here right now. We don't have to reinvent anything. There's nothing. There's no tool that we need. Are there tools that could help us move faster? Are there tools coming in the future? Are there nascent technologies of hydrogen or potentially even carbon capture, crazy other things like that? Maybe sometime in the future. But for right now, we've got everything we need. And my house was proof of that starting in 2006. And Veridian is proof of that now, right? We're showing what is absolutely possible today with the existing tools. The challenge is we really need a new technology of organization, right? Yeah. Not new tech for heat pumps or anything else like that. I invite that new tech,
new business models. Yeah.
But we need the new business models like you guys are doing. We need the unwavering commitment to getting it done with the knowledge that it absolutely is possible because it already exists, right? It already exists. My house, 2006, we looked at this house. I had recently met Jason McLennan. He had just founded the Living Building Challenge, and we looked at the roof of our house, and it was this that we were thinking about buying. Perfect south-facing roof. It had lead paint, asbestos siding, a gas-powered lawnmower in the shed, a Mueller Climatrol gas furnace. This thing was massive, like 6 feet long, in the basement. And everything was humming along, just working just fine. And that house could have done that for another 100 years. But we looked at that and said, all right, let's make this a Living Building Challenge net zero energy building. And we were the 21st projects through the Living Building Challenge to achieve net zero energy, the first in a historic district, still the oldest building in America to achieve net zero energy in a historic district. And I kind of thought that everyone was going to follow that path right after that. And look, we did it. Here it is. There's the example. And that everyone's just going to unplug the gas, make their house all electric, put solar panels on the roofs, maybe add a battery for some resilience. We were going to upgrade the grid and everything was going to be fine. Instead, what we got was people just thought we were a bunch of hippies bathing in our pasta water. And we weren't. But just to make them think that a little bit more, we took it even a step further. I became an advisor for the University of Michigan Blue Lab. We really focused on water and what we could do, and can we conceptually restore the ecological water flow of this site. And so we asked this group of graduate students at the University of Michigan, if this house didn't exist and the rain were falling from the sky, where would it go? And can we then theoretically, put that building back in that place and create a system that captures that flow uses it in the same way that a tree in a forest would capture that flow and go to net positive water? And the answer was yes. The project was about 5 years. We harvest 5,000 gallon cisterns in the side yard off of a metal roof, through Galvalume pipes, through a filter, through a 3-stage filtration system with a pump, and then carbon filtration and UV light at the end. Potable standard water at the end of that. We also proved possible gray water recapture. Again, not proved possible, took off the shelf technology. Things were NSF 350, all these, standard off the shelf stuff. And then we didn't do this, but proved possible, again, nutrient recovery systems that we could have harvested all of the waste in there. And then you just take that and say, and that's the kind of what they call in biology a terminal node, right? If you can do it in that terminal node, then you can replicate that, and you can start to create ecosystems. You can start to create networks that work together and emerge from the ground up. So when we're in the middle of this, the Flint water crisis happened. So I started appearing on media outlets and writing about this and saying, it's like, listen, Flint is not a lead problem. It's a systems thinking problem. And that was proof when weeks later, after one of the first interviews I did, they changed the chemistry in the pipes to get to stop the lead from leaching out, and then they had Legionella. And then so they added some other chemical to the pipe, and then there was another problem because there was other problems that were eliminating the Legionella. So they were literally just playing whack-a-mole with this system that was built for several 100,000 homes that now was only like 60 or 70,000 homes. So what we proved was that if you do this like in biology or in any kind of physical or natural system, where you have these emergent properties, where complex adaptive systems emerge from the bottom up in an organic fashion, then you get systems that, instead of being linear and fracture critical, you get systems that are complex and adaptive and resilient. And they do fail. Right? You still get failures in nature, but those failures are small and localized and graceful.
Matt, can I ask a question real quick? You're what I like to call a sustainability nerd. Joel and myself are fellow sustainability nerds. I get the sense that you were hands-on with your project. You were probably helping explore some of the technologies, had a lot of comfort talking to contractors about what you thought should be done and how it should be done. For the average homeowner that's not a sustainability nerd, is there an easy way for them to do this, or is that sort of a missing piece of what's necessary?
Yeah, fuck no. That's the problem. That is the problem right now. Again, the solutions are all there, but Sarah Hammerschmidt, who's on our team, who's PhD in urban planning and an engineer, and she had to get a heat pump water heater for her house, and she asked, hey, can we get help with some of the contractors we're using? Veridian said, you know what, you go out, do this as a consumer first, and let's see what happens. And she knows a lot. She's a smart person. She's a nerd as well, and she got contractors telling her, and you've heard this on this podcast before, the same story. Heat pump water heaters don't work in Michigan. Yeah. That's a heat pump water heater. That's going to be $6,000. Gas is much better, and it's going to be much cheaper for you. So all of these just, total misinformation that she had to go through just to get a freaking hot water tank put in her basement. So it's hard, and that's a systems problem that we need to overcome. But I think with the IRA and with here in Ann Arbor, there's a badass new program that the Office of Sustainability and Innovation is doing called they're having a concierge, right? And so they're going to be this department that you can call as a consumer and say, heat pump just died, or my water tank just died. What do I do? And they will give you some contractors. They will tell you about the different technologies. They'll give you a brief education on what to do, and they will set up these phone calls and these meetings for you to get quotes from contractors that have worked with the city to get trained in this. So these are the kind of like really systematic thinking that change the way the organization is done.
I'll tell Owen a little story here about how I met you years ago, Matt, and we talked about this before the show, but go to Living Future conference. So you mentioned Living Building Challenge. So the conference
Yeah.
that the Living Building Challenge has every year called the Living Future Unconference. I started going, I don't know, 2013, 2014, and I was working at the city of Santa Monica in the Office of Sustainability and had some consulting and construction experience. But you go there and there's presentations, there's panels, there's white papers being presented, and lots of people that are like consultants or people that work at the city, like me, not really decision makers. It was, I think, there and Greenbuild, the really hardcore green building conferences are too many sustainability nerds and not like real estate people, right? Who we need to talk to. But I remember meeting you or hearing about the house that you just described, your own home that you converted to net zero energy. And I'd love for you to tell a little bit of your story about before that, because I don't think you come from engineering or building necessarily before you did that with your house. But it was, you're one of these inspirations to me in the industry that we walk in, because I was always, look at this guy. He just took action on his own house in Michigan and made this happen. And it's something Owen and I, we vibed on when we were in grad school. We to this day, that's why we're in business together, because we got tired of convincing people to do the right thing and said, let's just take action ourselves. Let's go buy buildings. Let's own the buildings. Let's control our destiny. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to just give you credit for doing what you did there and being an inspiration to all of us to take action. But maybe here you can rewind a little bit and tell us that story. Like, how did what were you doing prior to building that house and converting it to net zero, and how'd you get into this?
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing is, I started out in law school, and right towards the end of law school, there were, two, what I consider pretty seminal books came out. One was, Al Gore's Earth in the Balance, and the other was Paul Hawken's The Ecology of Commerce. And those are really profound to me. And really that was kind of the beginning of my recognition in the early 90s that like the climate is in crisis. Like that was clear back then to me. And then from that time, really looking for that lever. And initially that was going to be, well, do I go work for the EPA? And I went and met with folks at the EPA, and it's like, well, what do you guys do? Oh, we have these rules that really suck and are really kind of this really low bar. And if you violate these rules, we're going to fine you or send you to prison. And it's like, okay, so best scenario is someone's already polluted and I put them in jail. That didn't seem like an effective tool that I wanted to do. The other path was tort, which was, you basically sue somebody. I was offered a job in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, about a dioxin spill that was from a paper company. I'm laughing, but it's really sad. On the Pascagoula River, right? Completely polluted the Pascagoula River. And there was this, decades-long lawsuit of all the farmers that lost their crops or had them ruined, of people who got sick, of this incredible environmental harm from environmental organizations, from all living creatures along that river that were harmed by this pollution. And then what do? It's like, well, after years, there's a settlement or a lawsuit that makes them pay. And again, that doesn't get us to where we need to go. And the question, in 2006 that Jason McClendon posed was, what does good look like? And the EPA and lawyers don't ask that question, what does good look like? It's what did you do wrong? And how do I punish you for doing wrong? It's kind of like that whole footprint versus handprint analogy, right? It's like we want to, what can you do? What kind of action can you take? So so that kind of led us, and when I was in Santa Monica, also very active with environmental the movement there, and trying to do educational media, and started Greenovation TV too early because it was 2005, just when YouTube started. So we were still filming on cameras, no iPhones yet. I'm talking big old cameras too, eventually that led to, just this serendipity of finding this house, and my wife wanting to do a couple more years working with a professor that she met in grad school and staying here. And then we were going to head back to the West Coast, but instead we fell in love with Ann Arbor, ended up having this net zero home, having two just stunningly beautiful, sweet as can be daughters in the home, who became what my mother-in-law calls the net zero babies, because they live in this home where they haven't experienced living in a fossil fuel burning environment, right? There's no gas stove in their house since they've been born. we have to. I remember when they were little kids, we had to explain. When we clicked on the fire in the kitchen, they're like, "Why the fuck is there fire in the kitchen, Daddy?" And you have to explain, do not touch the stove here. You can't do that. And there's one great story where I borrowed a friend's car, because we've had an electric car for years. We borrowed a friend's car, and I told him to, get in the car. Let's start. And I start the car, and then my older daughter was like, "Wait, what is that? What is that?" It's like that's the sound of the engine. It's okay. Why is it vibrating? Why is it doing that? Why is it doing that? It's like, that's just what it does. It vibrates. It's what fossil fuel does. Okay, I said, I forgot something in the house, girls. Let me run inside. So I run inside the house. A minute later, the girls come inside, screaming, tears streaming down their face. Daddy, the car's on fire. The car's on fire. And I look out the window, and there's the steam coming out of the tailpipe. And they hadn't seen that in their own cars sitting in our driveway before. And so just to see like this future through their eyes, that smoke coming out of a tailpipe is stupid and bizarre. Fire in your kitchen that smells disgusting. They even talk about how bad gas cars smell and how bad this is the future they're living in. So they're the net zero babies. And then and that's kind of how we got to where we are.
That's crazy. It's like internal combustion engines and gas ranges are going to be like the rotary phones for this next generation of kids. Like, if I have a 18-year-old stepson, if I show him a rotary phone, has no idea what to do.
Yeah, but the rotary phones never killed anybody in their sleep, not without help from someone.
Yeah, but it's funny to think about people like not understanding what internal combustion car sounds like or feels like or smells like. Like, that's a crazy concept for someone that's grown up with them.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing that's really profound. And again, that's one of the points of optimism for me, is that we're not selling that, the hippie bathing in your pasta water. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something that's really freaking beautiful. You can imagine this future that's, I don't need to say it here even. I think it's great that we can talk in shorthand, that it's just damn beautiful. It's clean. It's quiet.
It's awesome.
It's better. It's cheaper. And my daughter's getting to experience that and think that all else is bizarre. I mean, bizarre.
That's awesome.
Well, let's transition to Veridian. I'd love our guests to learn all about what you're doing there. I was an early investor in Veridian.
That's right. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and even that part is really interesting to us. It's something Owen and I we haven't talked much about, but I'm going to ask you about that process, the crowdfunding side, because as you know, it's what we're kind of trying to do here with Raven, is crowdfund a net zero real estate business model through people that care about climate. And traditionally don't have access to investing in real estate. And I would say, when we talked about launching this company, like, are there enough people out there that are going to invest in this? Are we sure? And I told the story of, I've done a couple weird investments in my career. I'm not saying yours is weird, but it was like, this guy's building a living building challenge community in Michigan. I kind of know him. I don't know him that well, but I know what the living building challenge is. And this sounds inspiring to me. And he's letting me invest for as little as $1,000. And
yeah, 500 was the lowest. Actually,
one of my favorite investments I continue to hold.
Yeah. Sorry, we're still holding it. I thought we'd be done by now.
Well, it's a lesson learned for the real estate investor. Your investment could be illiquid for some time, but that's okay.
Yeah. So that was pretty exciting, actually, and that was something we did just kind of out of. It was definitely helpful. I'm not going to say there wasn't in the beginning to have that money, but it was really not that much. It was really just $300,000, and the reason we did that was twofold. Really, just kind of to be out there and kind of educate the community about what we were doing, and that gave us the opportunity to really talk about the neighborhood and inspire folks. And then the other was to really have people in the community vested in the solution, right? And giving that opportunity for as little as $500. And it was pretty challenging. We worked through a company that's actually now defunct to set up the crowdfund and all the SEC stuff. But
we know all about that. Yeah.
Was it a Reg CF? Do you remember?
Yes, it was. Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. But it just really opened the door. It gave us an easy way to really connect with folks in the community, and not just for people to say, hey, that's a cool neighborhood, or hey, I support that neighborhood, but say, I support this so much that I'm willing to put my money into it, and then offer them profit in the end, that the community should be profiting from this as well. And so I think we raised about $350,000 through that, but also through that process, we also got one of our early primary angel investors through that process who came and saw me talk, and he's actually he and his wife are actually moving in to the neighborhood. They're buying a home in the neighborhood, so they're that vested in it. So it wasn't through the crowdfund, but that kind of inspired this larger investor to come to us.
That's cool. We would probably talk too much crowdfunding. So in spirit of educating our audience on more than crowdfunding, let's move on. But
finance nerd,
talk about the project. What is it? What was the vision? Where are you now? I mean, I'm sure you're used to giving this pitch. Let's hear it.
Yeah. So, it's funny. I'm used to giving the pitch. Yeah. But the thing is, there's so much to talk about. It all depends on, I never know where to start. But with this, we really did. We had the opportunity to buy this land. It was a former youth prison. Before that, it was an asylum. And before that, it was the county poor farm, going back all the way to 1834. 1836 is when the county purchased it. So Washtenaw County is Ann Arbor is the county seat. And in the 70s, they made most of the poor farm into a park. Prior to that, they had carved out a part of this poor farm, which was the asylum at the time, and they made a youth prison. That corner of the property, roughly 14 acres or so, was put up for RFP back in 2016. So that's how long we've been doing this. And we competed with other developers, conventional developers. Every single one of them proposed something that was on a grid, that was paved, removed all of the trees, and had a big detention pond down at the south part of the property. And what we said was, we really want to do something completely profound, and we need the collaboration of the community. This is not something that we can do on our own. We need to be asking, what does good look like? The county at the time was debating whether or not they should sign on to the Paris Accords. Cities across the country had just started signing on and agreeing, yes, we're going to commit to these Paris Accords and the commitments that meant. But people weren't asking, what does that mean? What does it mean to keep carbon below 1.5 degrees Celsius? What does it mean to have our emissions by 2030? Nobody was talking about all electric in 2016. Very few people were talking about deep decarbonization. I was asked to speak at as a surrogate to a gubernatorial candidate in Michigan several years ago, and it was for this pipeline protest. And I just asked everybody in the room who were, these protests are hardcore advocates, right? Stop the pipeline. I'm going to chain myself to a truck if you build this pipeline. And I said, hey, raise your hand if you can tell me where does this pipeline end? And somebody said, oh, it ends in this city in Ohio. Somebody said, no, it ends in this place in Ontario, right? Both ends of the line. And I said, well, raise your hand if you have a gas stove, a gas heater, a gas dryer, or anything gas in your house. Every single hand went up in the room. Every single hand went up in the room. And I said, that's where this pipeline ends. I said, that's what we need to rethink. And then we can end these pipelines because there'll be no need for them. So Veridian was kind of this act of optimism and saying that we need to be building that neighborhood for the 22nd century, right? What does a neighborhood in 2030 look like if it meets all of these goals? And we said, that's what we do. That's what we target. And it's not just about deep decarbonization, but it's also about biodiversity. It's about human health. It's about equity. And all of those things are preconditions to decarbonization, right? If you're not equitable, what the hell's the point, number one? And number two, you're not going to get there if you're not equitable. We're not going to be able to decarbonize if we don't do this in an equitable way. And then biodiversity, again, if we're, we've lost, I'm not going to give numbers here because they'll all be wrong, but, you hear every day about the species loss just in North America alone. I heard Christiana Figueres on a podcast this morning talking about the golden frogs that she grew up with, and she wanted to show them to her daughters, and she can't because they're gone. And it's one thing to have this acceptance of loss, right? That's why we all do this, right? That's what Christiana's point was, that we do this work because of loss, what we've already lost and what we're afraid of losing. And I can accept that we lose things, but I think it was Paul Hawken who talked about the death of birth is something very different, and that's what extinction is. And so we have to really focus on those things as well. Otherwise, we inherited a healthy planet when we were born, the three of us. Relatively, right? We were all born probably way before it was, under 380 parts per million, 350 parts per million. Now we're at 420 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So Veridian really was just a test of a bigger version of what my home was. Like, this is what's possible. This is what we need to do. Look at how beautiful it can be.
At the time, you were not a real estate developer. You were not someone who bid on plots of land that were up for opportunities to develop into single family housing. You created Veridian. That RFP, I would imagine the county to choose you, which obviously they did. The criteria or how that choice was made, or how they typically choose a developer versus another. I know I've heard you speak about it, so I know you did a lot of advocacy, and there was a lot of education with the political side of this. So describe winning that RFP and how you did it for a company that had no track record.
Yeah, of course, right. Thrive Collaborative had already existed, but we really just did nothing but consulting and hoped that people would take our advice, and did some other home building and things like that. Otherwise the county would just sit back and say, "Hey, who the fuck are you?" We have to partner with great people, right? So my partners, Joey Jonah and David Eifred, builders, developers, construction. Joey's family has been doing this for decades. And so when asked, have you guys ever done this before? And the answer is nobody has. But look at the experience that we bring to the table, and we were able to show this kind of powerhouse team of what we were doing and what we were capable of doing. And then also just have the saying, you guys are just going to have to accept some level of faith and have this unprecedented level of collaboration, compassion, and creativity, because everything we do here is going to be a little different. Nothing we're doing is experimental, but doing it all at once has not been done. So solar neighborhoods, been done. There's some net zero neighborhoods out there, but are they doing the ecological restoration? Are they doing equitable housing? So we have our nonprofit housing provider, Avalon Housing, which is doing phase 2 of the project, which are families coming out of homelessness. So there's 50 units of deeply affordable housing, in the neighborhood of like $500 a month rent. All the way up to homes that are $1 million. So there's like, $200,000 homes, affordable housing, workforce housing, $500,000.
And it's essentially a single family development, mostly around a farm. Is that
so
accurate?
Yeah, it's not around a farm, but agriculture is incorporated into it. And one of the things we'll be doing is, the Honey Locust Farm Stop, which is a 7-day-a-week farm stop grocery store, which is really modeled after this amazing place called Argus Farm Stop here in Ann Arbor, which is supplied by over 200 local and regional farmers and producers, that you can get every single food product you need year round, 7 days a week in a 3,000 square foot location. Because every day a new farmer is bringing, so you might not have the same farmer's eggs every day, but every day there is some farmer that's delivering fresh eggs that they harvested, that morning. Tomatoes are seasonal. Some will come in greenhouses and be, a little bit later in the season or earlier. Hoop houses. Since they've started, there have been people who've started adding mushroom crops, meats, cheeses, milk, in glass bottles, like everything you can imagine. Chocolate from a local family. They're from Ecuador, and they import the beans, and they create chocolate here in Ann Arbor. Literally everything you can get, fresh bread, some of the best in the world, all in one little location. And so we're going to expand on that idea and make the location net zero energy. So it'll be possibly the first net zero energy grocery store. We're going to target zero waste, which is going to be really hard, and see how does a grocery store tackle that in a 3,000 square foot space. We've got really major challenges with, like, when you buy eggs from a farmer, they're going to be $5 to $7 a dozen, right? Well, if you're paying $500 a month rent, how do you deal with $7 a dozen eggs? So that's a question that is unanswered, and we're going to have to figure out. So there's a lot of things like that. But there's a social aspect to this. In fact, Veridian started at Argus Farm Stop because I ran into a friend of mine, Conan Smith, who's a county commissioner at Argus, right? It's this community space. So there's a cafe. We'll have a tea garden and a beer garden. We'll have some short-term rentals so people in the neighborhood can house guests and things. If you live in a one-bedroom apartment, how do you have your family come visit? Well, there's a place in the neighborhood that you can rent. And then we'll take some of the profit from that and subsidize. Hopefully, I hope this will work out. Keep some of those other units, those smaller units, for people who wanted to live in the neighborhood but couldn't manage the cost and yet don't qualify for affordable housing. So if we can get units that we could charge, $800-900 a month rent here in Ann Arbor, which is pretty low cost, we're going to do that.
So are you guys? Are you building this in phases? Go for it, Joel.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, you going.
I was just going to ask if you're building in phases.
I think we're going to ask the same. We're going to ask this. Yeah, we're going to ask the same question. Where are you at? I mean, this will show how passive of an investor I am. I should know this, but I don't even know where you're at in the process.
So we need an investor update, Joel. So we do have our own little podcast every week, and you guys can follow me on Twitter and on Instagram, and at Veridian at County Farm is the handle for Instagram. Matt Grocoff on Twitter. So right now, the biggest challenge is we're attempting to eliminate concrete from the roadways, and that's been a big challenge. And then pour foundations. We're framing in a factory. So right now they're building some of that framing. We've got to get that onto site, but you're not allowed to bring wood to the site until the fire marshal says that he can get a fire truck in there. And it's something that needs to change, is these outdated non-evidence-based fire codes where you can put solar panels on the roof and everything else. We could have a whole 5-hour session here just on the challenges that we're up against and making these things happen. But the elimination of concrete, actually just yesterday, we had a really sad moment on site where I sat down with John Bello, our director of operations, and just really had just kind of this emotional moment on site where he was saying, look, the engineering of this could screw things up if we do this entire roadway where the city is forcing us to put in sanitary sewers and everything else. We should probably do this section of the road in concrete, and just doing 25% of the roads in concrete was this huge, emotionally challenging thing for us, because we're talking, if we did all of the roads in concrete, us and Avalon, it would be over 1 million pounds of CO2 needed emissions just to produce that much concrete, 1 million pounds. So if we could eliminate that, that'd be an extraordinary win. And so once we have those roads in, and some of those went in yesterday, we're going to be able to start framing, and then we're off to the races. We always say that we're going to start the next thing on Monday, but we never tell you which Monday.
I like that.
Owen's a speculative real estate developer. Can he purchase? Is there homes for sale still in the Veridian?
Yeah. Thanks, Rod. We're crappy salespeople. We actually don't have a sales team, and the reason for that is it's like, how do you sell this? Like there's just an education component to this. So we've got really extraordinary buyers. We've got a WhatsApp group of all of our buyers that have already on, and they're making friends with each other now. Some of them purchased almost 2 years ago now. So we have a section, only 24 homes available for immediate purchase agreement. Then we have a second sequence, which they're up for reservations, and that's a small refundable deposit, so anywhere between $2,000 to $10,000, depending on the home, for a refundable deposit to hold your space in line for a particular address. And of that, so now we have, I forgot where we are now. It's changing every day, but I think we're at 68 units out of the 129 that we have for sale. either have been reserved or purchased at this point. And then we have another 60 people on waiting list for units types that are full and no longer available. So we're actually kind of having a mid-course correction and redesigning some things and removing some streets, removing some garages, and doing what we can to add more bike share, more car share, to get more green space and bioswale, and take those garage spaces and turn them into living spaces. So this is, again, it's like, what does this mean when you have, this, car light lifestyle? It means more green space. It means more affordable housing. It means more housing, right? And for us, it actually means more usable square footage that we can sell and recoup some of our costs. So this is a really big deal. And if we can just get rid of single stair access rules here in the States, it's a whole nother podcast. Oh, you guys should have Michael Eliason on as well. Talk about single stair access and floor plan and footprints and fire codes and all the other good stuff.
Well, Matt, it's been fascinating, inspiring as always listening to you. But I think I got to wrap us up. We're running out of time. We talked a lot here today about how do you overcome despair and how do you prevent yourself from being negatively impacted by the data around climate change. So we always like to finish the interviews with the same question. I think you'll have a great answer here because you've already touched on some of this stuff. But yeah, how do you, with everything going on, all the negativity, all the doomsday or talk about climate change, what gives you hope?
Yeah, you pour yourself into the work. And what gives me hope is all the people that are out there doing the work, knowing that if we do stop our emissions, temperature rise stops. That's what the science is. There's nothing more hopeful than that. That's just a fact. If we stop emissions, temperature stops rising. And we have all the tools we need to do that. I just heard Jonathan Foley. Had the privilege of being at TED conference and give his TED talk. And he said that that now is better than new and time is better than tech. So do everything now. The clock is ticking. And there are people out there doing this work. And our biggest enemy is despair and doomism. And optimism is a precondition to success. So let's fucking go.
Well said. And those clips from the TED Talks, that's perfectly said. Now better than new. I think that Owen's probably going to steal that one.
Yeah, that's now mine.
He's also Jonathan.
Well, Matt, you mentioned a little earlier, but let's do it all very officially here. At the end of the show, we want to make sure our audience can find you. So podcasts, Instagram, your personal handle. How does the audience find you? How do we learn more about your company and what you're working on?
Definitely find me on LinkedIn. It's just at Matt Grocoff, Grocoff. Veridian.community is the website. There's actually a really cool video that McLennan Design put together for us, kind of a fly through of the neighborhood that's stunning and inspiring. You can really see we're not selling sustainability. You're just looking at something absolutely beautiful. Twitter, Matt Grocoff. Threads, also Matt Grocoff. Instagram, you can find me. My Veridian at County Farm is the handle there. And what else? And then there's on YouTube, if you look up the Veridian podcast, you'll see us on there. And we're trying to do some more longer format stuff that's of interest to everybody. But yeah.
Well, very cool. I encourage everyone to check it out. We only touched the surface of what Matt's trying to do here at Veridian today. I've been inspired by it. I know Owen's a fan as well. So Matt, we're rooting for you. We'll share all this stuff through our social media platforms and keep crushing out there.
Guys, thank you for starting Raven. Thank you for doing everything that y'all are doing. We've got a lot of work to do together, and just grateful. You guys are what make me optimistic.
Oh, well, we appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt.
Well, let's wrap it up there. Thank you to everyone for joining. You can find us on most of the social media platforms at Join Raven. So that's Join, and Raven is with a Y, RAYVEN. You can find this podcast and more great content at joinraven.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, like, and share with your friends. And until next time, we encourage you to ask yourself, what are you doing to to fight the climate crisis.